I mean, if you really wanted to be hard about it, you should get up in all the silly clothes and then go down to East LA and see how long you last. You know, dress in your Motley Crue outfit, you know, and scream your lyrics, and then go down to East LA where the real hard people live. And then see how hard you are and see how bad you are. Go down to like Miami. Go, the Keys are where all the white people have been pushed. Go to the real Miami, sundown, with your black leather pants and your attitude and your Highway to Hell thing or whatever you're into, and see how long your body remains intact, you know? That to me is some real hard, real stuff, you know.
What bands have you seen?
Over the years, I've seen, if we go down to hardcore bands, I've seen UK Subs, Dead Kennedys, Anti-Pasty, Anti-Nowhere League. I mean, a lot of British hardcore with some American hardcore as well, plus supporting acts.
Yeah. Which one do you think was your favourite?
Dead Kennedys were good. They were a really tight band. I mean, most people think about punk being, you know, it's thrown to the wind or whatever happens, but these guys really knew their stuff. You know, Jellyberry Afro is the guy, lead singer. He was on that money. He was really good, and the band were really, really good, really tight. And what gets when you try and play those songs, when you play Too Drunk to,
yeah,
I can't say it on camera, but anyway, that song, when you break it down and you try and play it, it's an amazingly technical, beautiful song, well structured and put together. They know their craft, but it's hardcore and it's to the point. It's good.
Yeah. Do you think that they were important for the time, for what they stood for?
I think the Dead Kennedys are a very important band. I think they're the top of the echelon when it came to how US punk and hardcore is perceived. I wouldn't say they're commercial, they're not, but they're the most known out of those bands, I think, that came out from that period. And they were a tour de force. They were really well known here as well, and probably well known all over Europe as well. I mean, a lot of the other bands were as well, but they probably tip the crop when it comes to it.
How would you describe the live performances around the time?
If I had to describe it in 3 words, I'd say very bloody loud. I'd say that, but I'd also say extremely energetic. Really quite intimidating when you first get there, and you realise everyone's there for the same reason, and it's quite good. When you go a second time to see it, you're really more comfortable with it. I mean, I was only 17, I think, when I saw them, and I loved it. And it was in a small club in Birmingham. I think it might have been the Irish Centre, I think, which was a brand new building at the time, and it was really good. Excellent.
Do you think they've influenced modern music or any other kind of music genres?
It's a strange thing because rock, punk, and all that influence-wise. I mean, someone said something to me the other day that rock and roll music and punk and all that is the new jazz, and I didn't know what they meant by that, but I understand that now. That, you know, guitar music has now become like the jazz music was, but with a bigger fan base. So, yeah, I think they're a hugely influential band, and I think they influenced a lot. Around nowadays, yeah, you could say a bit Green Day's got that in there, you know, along with even the Clash from back in the day. There was a lot of that in new music as well. But even Dead Kennedys and that punk scene was inspired by the DIY ethic. But I think the States got that better than here. It got commercialised very quickly here. Over there they carried it on, and I think that's fine. They the Ramones to influence them. They were very DIYing themselves, but became very successful at that. So yeah, hugely influential.
The most popular music genre during the 1980s was hair metal, which was a more mainstream and clean version of the 70s metal scene. Most of the songs were about partying and living an unrealistic lifestyle. The band dressed up in costumes on stage and was seen as cocky, generic, and known for having a bad attitude. But underneath the surface of mainstream music, there was a group of bands who wanted to challenge the mainstream by creating a genre of music which challenged the trends of the era. This genre was called hardcore punk. Hardcore punk, also known as hardcore, is a punk rock subgenre which mixes the angry passion of punk with the intense sound of heavy metal. This created a faster, harder, more aggressive sound compared to the other genres of the time. The hardcore scene in the 80s was notorious for the live performances and how a friendly mosh pit would develop into a violent fist fight between the audience and sometimes the band. The shows would attract mostly fans but sometimes attract violent individuals who just wanted to fight. Some bands had to adapt to the hostile environments by having to stop the shows when it gets too violent, or having to punch people when they feel threatened, or the show's getting out of hand. The bands that carried the scene were Black Flag, Bad Brains and the Dead Kennedys, who purely stuck to their individual sounds. This made them well known in the community because they all didn't sound the same and had different takes on the genre. Black Flag were one of the main hardcore bands and were active from 1978 to their breakup in 1986. The most well-known lineup was Henry Rollins, Greg Ginn, Chuck Dukowski and Robo. But it took a few years for the band to have a solid lineup. Before Rollins was on vocals, there were three prior to him. Keith Morris, who was on the Nervous Breakdown EP, he left the band and founded the band The Circle Jerks. Ron Race joined the band shortly after Keith left as a temporary replacement. He later left and joined Red Cross. Des Cadena, who was the band's rhythm guitarist at the time, was on vocals and can be heard on the Jealous Again EP. He was on vocals until the band recruited Rollins. Shortly after recruiting Rollins, the band were in the studio recording their first LP, Damaged. The album is considered to be one of the best punk albums and is probably the best album that the band produced. The album's main themes were about self-conflict, being an individual and standing up for yourself. These themes are seen on the track Depression and the track Rise Above, which are fast and angry with a lot of shredding in them. The album's most controversial track is Police Story, which is about police brutality and is probably the angriest track on the album. The album also has some songs that are more upbeat and jokey. You see this most on the tracks like TV Party and Six Pack. The album is also important because it was able to show that the band wasn't afraid to delve into sensitive subjects like depression and inequality. The album solidified Rollins as a member of the band, and even though Rollins wasn't the best singer in the band, he had the passion and the energy that the band needed. Bad Brains were one of the biggest hardcore bands due to their sound being so unique compared to other bands. This is because they successfully mixed reggae and jazz into the hardcore sound. The band's original lineup was HR on vocals, Dr. No on lead guitar, Daryl Jennifer on bass, and Earl Hudson on drums. The band's most important album was their self-titled debut. The album is regarded as one of the best hardcore albums due to how unique it was and how it stood out at the time. Most of the tracks are short and fast. This is most notable on the tracks Sailing Gone, Band in the DC, and The Big Takeover. The album's vocals were influenced from Stevie Wonder and Bob Marley, but the guitar, bass and drums were inspired from bands like the Sex Pistols and Black Sabbath. The album's main themes are standing up to authority and censorship. Bad Brains is one of the most unique and influential punk bands of all time, and even though they have had multiple lineup changes over the years, the band has still stayed iconic and have had an imprint on the hardcore scene as a whole. The Dead Kennedys formed in 1978 and broke up in 1986. The original lineup was Jello Biafra on vocals, East Bay Ray on guitar, Klaus Fluoride on bass, and D.H. Pellegrin on drums. Their most influential and popular album is Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables. The album is considered one of the most defying albums of the hardcore scene. The album's main themes are standing up to authority or mocking political figures, whether they were left or right wing. The album's top tracks are Holiday in Cambodia and California Über Alles. One of the most unique songs on the album is Holiday in Cambodia. The song depicts an upper-class American citizen being forced into a Cambodian labour camp while comparing the toxicity of capitalism to the extremity of communism. The album reached number 33 on the UK album chart on its initial release. In the band's early days, they were involved in a number of controversies surrounding their name. Herb Caen from the San Francisco Chronicle wrote in November 1978, "Just when you think tastelessness has reached its nadir, along come a punk rock group called Dead Kennedys, which will play at Marbury Gardens on November the 27th, the 15th anniversary of JFK's assassination." Overall, the Dead Kennedys are one of the most notorious punk bands and carried the genre to a more mainstream audience. The hardcore scene was a retaliation against the mainstream media and has imprinted itself on the punk genre as a whole and has inspired multiple music genres and started a whole subculture of music.